speaker. Everyone is um, welcomed on mute, on audio, so that we ensure that the quality of the webinar remains as wonderful as possible. So welcome everyone on mute to audio, so that we ensure that the quality of the webinar. Um, um, if it's okay now, we'll get ahead. I love technology. It's wonderful, but you always have some spices that are added with technological issues. So welcome once again. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are beginning a new academic season in the United Kingdom. And as part of that, of course, we're starting a new season of webinars through Persia Educational Foundation. As you all may know, Persia Educational Foundation is a UK-based charity that is focused on education and providing opportunities for those who are of Iranian descent, mostly in academic setting. But of course, the foundation, based on the inclusive vision of its founders, is created to ensure that Iranians have access to the best and latest bodies of knowledge to assist us in the development and advancements of each of our own selves as well as our society. We are going through interesting times as Iranians. I think this is the first time in more than 4 decades that we are able to focus on our young population with a new sense of vigor and pride and energy. And what is happening more than any other time in the past 4 decades is that we see a young generation of Iranians who are shaping their future through their commitment to a range of ideals that perhaps for more than a century Iranians have been striving for. What is at the heart of this process is the issue of education of Generation Z. And as a foundation, which is dedicated to inclusivity and diversity without any impartiality to any specific political or religious agendas, we are very interested in finding out what is it that we could do wherever we may be, whether in the heart of a small town near Bushehr or Sari, or sitting in the suburbs of Los Angeles or London. What is it that we could do together as a united nation, as a united community, to ensure that this generation that has risen up with complete commitment to ideals, universal ideals, that some of which perhaps stem from our past, such as the Cyrus Cylinder, but also shape modern society. What is it that we could do in terms of education, in terms of empowerment, in terms of enablement, that could assist them to reach the goals that we've all been searching for? So just to give it a little bit of background, we've been looking at Generation Z for a long time. In fact, not too long ago, just 7 years ago, at this very time of the year, Time magazine did a massive article on Generation Z and the future of Iran, whether we're really ready for what is to come next. And in it, they talked about a number of shifts, seismic shifts that need to happen in the education, culture, and mindset of all Iranians, not just those who are Generation Z. So perhaps if we could sort of keep that in the back of our minds, we could turn to our panelist, Dr Cameran, who has been involved in the space of seismic shifts in terms of what the younger generation of Iranians are doing for a long time through his own field of expertise. His biography was published on our social media and our site, so I don't want to take any more of your time or his time rereading everything that you've already studied. He needs no introduction. He's an innovator, he's an educator, and he's completely dedicated to changes at the grassroots level in Iranian society. So given his focus on human rights, given his focus on technology, given his focus on education and empowerment, it would be wonderful, Kamran, if it's okay with you, to begin with, what is it that you feel may be one or two secrets for the success of this current generation Z and how they are shaping our society today?
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and it's really nice to be here. And also thank you for the lack of introduction, because then I don't have to sit there awkwardly while while hearing people read while hearing you read my past achievements. I just want to also acknowledge, right now is a really, I think, emotionally sensitive time for so many Iranians outside and of course inside the country. What we've seen has been heartbreaking, really deeply touching, inspiring. Unlike anything I have seen in my life, and I've followed Iranian politics quite closely since I was a little boy, being forced to watch the news by my dad, and then it turned out to be a wonderful thing for my life to be able to watch that. But it's been extremely touching and very inspiring. I think on the education side of things and also on the activism side of things, I'm often in touch with a lot of young people, whether that's directly through the activism work, or as a professor and working with students, mentoring them who come straight out of Iran, or directly coming there, and of course also the Iranian diaspora, many of them. And often, as being the only faculty member, my father's Iranian, so I'm half, but the only faculty member who can pronounce the kh sound or something like that, or talk about how good Fessenjun is, or these sorts of things. It's actually quite resonant, and it helps the students really open up more than they might have in the past, in another situation, or discovering that our parents have similar weird habits, or whatever, quote unquote weird habits that might be. And in terms of the success, I think one of the things that has always struck me is with Iranian students, and students also of Iranian descent, is the hunger that they have, the eagerness that they have to learn and to grow and to do something that's really beneficial for others. And of course, there are students, who are not so interested in that. But that has been one of the biggest themes that I have noticed over the years, is that there's a very unique hunger and an eagerness. There are students who are, if there's any projects that involve, going beyond sort of the bare academic minimums, or anything like that, these young people are so eager to go beyond, to find something meaningful and resonant, not only to connect with their culture, but to connect with their homeland and to improve things both inside and outside of Iran. And that is something you see mirrored in the protests, because you see a hunger with the young people also in Iran for these reciprocal events that have happened outside, these protests of solidarity, how meaningful it is, how important it is. I have had friends ask, who inside the country, who said, send us the pictures, send us the links to the news about the protests that you are doing out here, the things you are doing outside of the country. So we see this sort of, hunger and I mean a healthy hunger, would be part of something bigger. And I think that's one of the key parts of ensuring the success for younger Iranians, is understanding that they are much more global citizens, much more interested in this broader based, sense of both Iranian identity inside and outside the country. The diaspora, sometimes there's a hard stop. Well, you weren't born there, or you haven't visited there in 40 years. But the younger generation doesn't think so much in that way, in my experience at least. So recognizing that sort of transnational and desire to help and connect, I think, is quite important. And I think it's undoubtable for the second point, because you asked for 1 to 2, so I'll give one more, is the technological side of things. And I do believe that, and I have seen that the technology, it has become, and it has been, and it has become such an integral and normal part of how younger Iranians are relating and connecting to the world, like we see everywhere else. But there's a tendency to otherize these populations, unfortunately, in a lot of scholarship. But we really do see that the trends that occur globally on social media, of course, there's local trends as well. These impact Iranians. Iranians want to contribute and be part of these conversations and not be, sort of sanctioned out of them, if you will. and that this plays an enormously important role in their life. Even the song that came out, Baraya, which is is a song about tweets. I mean, and that became the anthem. I mean, I've listened to that song probably 10 times a day since it came out. It's an extraordinary song, but it really shows that linkage, that hunger, both, as I said earlier, for connecting with the world, and also the importance of technology for the sense of solidarity, shared struggle, to have a very safe space for young Iranians to actually explore what it means to be young and Iranian. So I'll stop right there for now.
I think you're making wonderful, wonderful comments. In fact, it is very true that there is a sort of an unstoppable hunger now at the grassroots level, and perhaps the time and the conditions are propitious for this hunger to be noticed and to get somewhere. The song that you referred to, Baraya, as well, it's of course it's gone viral, and many of us, I mean, I for sure wake up in the middle of the night with the song in my head. But I think what it indicates is that it is a very different level of creativity in terms of educational and artistic achievement of Iranian youth, the way they're able to articulate specific socioeconomic challenges, educational challenges through their art has been immensely moving over the past few decades. And certainly the song seems to indicate a new level in terms of what they're able to achieve. We are very, very happy to see what Generation Z is doing among the Iranian population in Iran and around the world. And certainly you have highlighted some of the secrets of their success at this time, although that list will be expanding over the coming months without a doubt. But what are some of the challenges that you think they face within the educational context of Iran, and perhaps if you wish to explore the MENA region in general?
Sure, and by challenges, do we mean only inside of the MENA region and inside of Iran, or also in the West?
If you wish to extend it to the West, let's do. But really, what are in your experience of working with the grassroots, what have been the challenges of Generation Z within Iran, and then as it sort of amplifies through the region and the globe?
Yeah, I do think that the Western sanctions have played a role in the education side of things, in particular the technology side, because there are, for example, a lot of creative tools that are available in the West that are not being made available for Iranians to actually experiment with, play with, do creative work with. And I do think that in a way can disadvantage Iranian youth when it comes to being more competitive in a global, in the global workplace, global marketplace. Although Iranians have developed their own sense of things, which is that real lovely sense of creativity, that fire that so many Iranian young people have. And so that, I think, is one side of things, is the challenge to get access to various tools that are available, like Photoshop, for example, that these things cannot be legally sold or stuff like that sort of a thing. Of course, there are many ways to get around that, and Iranian youth have certainly figured out how to become experts at Photoshop. If you are on Instagram, you will see there are some extremely talented Iranian photographers, young photographers, and you can see in their videos that they are using all these things that are banned. So that's something also very inspiring to see. So I think that is one challenge that is faced, is the access to the sort of tools to be able to explore creativity that's out there in a way that really nourishes them. I think the internet censorship and the sense of sort of surveillance is a real problem. So several years ago, I was working with some individuals, young people who had come out of Iran, and I was talking with them about internet searches and internet, how do they use the internet? And one of the things that really struck me a lot was an internalized sense of fear that they had about that their searches were being monitored. And one of them actually, talked about how they learned to stop asking questions, because, you're a young person, you go late at night and you might ask Google certain things you wouldn't ask your parents or even your friends or your family if you're trying to explore things. And there was a fear among many of them that these were being surveilled or watched, or that somebody would find out, or that their parents had told them, don't do this, they're watching you, don't make trouble for the family, these sorts of things. And then they carried that with them also outside the country, and they had it inside the country, where the sense of that sort of healthy space for them to explore who they are. What does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be 18, 19? How many questions do we all have at that age? Oh my gosh, still unanswered, many of them, but that they're so boiling up at that age. And to have that cut off because the government is censoring you, is surveilling, is watching, it instills a level of fear that we've seen that fear change with these protests, but I'm talking about a little while ago, was really heartbreaking. So I do think, speaking before the protests, that was something that was really holding people back. And I think that still is there. There is a sense of cautiousness about what can or cannot be shared online, what should or shouldn't be shared. So many of, young people on Iran also have alternative identities to be able to do this sort of things they would like to do online, which is also very heartbreaking, because we want our Iranian youth to be fully themselves, not have to pretend to be someone else. But we've seen that fear and rage become more change, and with the protests, where people are, as we've all seen, posting incredible videos under their own name, like even, Hossein Ronaki going and turning himself back in after the security services come in during the interview he was on. This insanely magical courage that they're manifesting. But I think that the censorship and the culture of censorship, which becomes so internalized, is a big challenge. And I think that is a bigger challenge also in the MENA region, is there's that sort of top-down authoritarian, heavy dictatorial model, which is so common in the region, and of course, unfortunately, is gotten so bad in Iran, is an enormous challenge for young people. It's as an educator, it's heartbreaking to see people with so much talent cut themselves off because the government says that they shouldn't ask those kind of questions. So I would say that is a great challenge.
So really, access to information and education, has been a real challenge. And of course, that takes us back to the 1980 Cultural Revolution, which, altered the face of education in Iran since. So really, as an educator, how do you feel this particular challenge of accessing information is something that we as Iranian community, it doesn't matter, as I said earlier, whether we're sitting, somewhere in a little town inside Iran, or, suburban areas or in the center of London or Los Angeles, what is it that we could do to help with that challenge? What do you think are opportunities for us to address these challenges that they're going through today?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, the first one, I know it's slightly illegal, so I apologize, but I think helping to get them the software that they might enjoy somehow, the tools that help them express their creativity, to enjoy that, and that are global standards. It's not that, that this tool in the United States is necessarily better, but if it's the global standard, that's important for also connecting with other like-minded people, so helping them get access to those things, however it may take. I remember years ago helping some young Iranians. There was some websites had you could get gift cards, and some of them were accessible in Iran, usable in Iran, and sending them electronic gift cards so that they could then get exactly what they needed through a legal way, which was great. But that is one thing, and I think that's very important. I think from the freedom of information, access to information side of things, I think that one of the challenges is that young Iranians they have access to a lot of this stuff either through VPNs or filter chicane or these sorts of things. But one of the problems is a lot of those tools are actually used by the government. The regime is actually using those tools, selling those tools on the black market, and then monitoring what the young people are using. It's extremely insidious, and it's common across actually the Middle East. You'll go to a bazaar, and somebody will have a filter shakan, in some other countries, or you'll find it online, but actually the back end will be powered, it'll be servers run by the Revolutionary Guard or information security, and they'll just be collecting and monitoring what people do. So ensuring that young people can have access to trusted, solid, filter shakan, VPN tools, I think is really important, and donating and supporting these movements outside of Iran, and also the homegrown ones. There's a lot of real technical innovation there. Is really important to be sure that they have tools that they can, even if they're going to, break the censorship laws in the country, they're doing so in a way that actually protects them and they can feel a little more confident. Because one thing we also see is when young people are accessing information, they're on these VPNs that they don't 100% trust, they're still holding themselves back and they're still not participating. So being sure that they get trustworthy technology like that, I think is key. And many of these organizations are quite happy to, they're focused on Iran, and there's a lot of good people working in that space, in the Iranian diaspora too.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So you're addressing the issue very much from a technical perspective, but what about content? We all are sort of reliving the trauma that we've gone through by seeing these images, by reading the words that we do on an hourly basis, if not every minute. It's been 5 weeks of watching our children fight for things that our ancestors have fought for. What do you think in terms of content, in terms of educational content, in terms of awareness raising, in terms of perhaps trauma-informed content that could assist generations? What are some of the thoughts that you have as an educator who's working with them on a daily basis? What could we do as fellow Iranians to ensure that they feel empowered and they can go on to seek the changes that they seem to be so absolutely committed to?
So that's a great question. And one of the things that I have heard and seen is the common frame is don't lecture us. There is a tendency for a lot of the diaspora to lecture, to shame Iranians in the country. Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? You should do this. This is how we do it. And I think that is a non-starter. That's not a dialogue. That's believe me, these young people are already being lectured enough. We see the women in the street dancing and burning hijab, they're tired of being lectured about how they should dress. I think there's just too much lecturing that can come from the outside. So I believe culturally, a dialogue, right? A creative dialogue. We would see it in the Cold War, right? We would see sometimes, Soviet dissidents who had fled to the West, not lecturing the dissidents who were still in the country, the artists, but creating collaborative artwork, collaborative pieces, things that were sparking dialogue. And I think that that's a really wonderful way to connect at a root level. Less lecturing and more like we're in a conversation together about what it means to be Iranian, and what it means, what the future of the country will be, whether we're inside of it or outside of it. So being in conversation rather than lecturing, it will be very hard for the diaspora to do, in my experience. But I think it's essential, because otherwise there's a danger of losing the connection with a generation that is also tired of being told what to do on the outside. I've heard that so often. And so I think that is a key point from my perspective. And it's culturally, it's connecting, conversation, no lecturing. And I also believe that it's quite important for us I think it is important for us to spread awareness, to respond and listen. And a long time ago, I co-founded Access Now. It's one of the largest tech and human rights organizations in the world. And one of the reasons I believe that was so successful is because, it was founded by, there's a lot of people, Iranians involved, is that we didn't come from a perspective like we're going to tell them what to do. They're the experts on what's going in the country. They're inside. They're 100% the experts, right? How can I use whatever resources I have outside or connected to support what they're saying they need, rather than telling them you need this? And I think that was extremely important. It's informed all my work, is to listen and then respond in a way that is collaborative and supportive. So if we can do that, I think that's great. And there are a few questions I see just popped up in the chat, actually.
Yes. So one of the things that it really matters, again, in the world of education is, of course, there's, you know, the technology and the content that you've spoken, but also there's often what they call the encouragement factor, right? As a specific figure who emboldens and encourages individuals to change through their learning and their experiences. So here we are, obviously, after generations of young Iranians rising to seek their inalienable rights, correct? So right to education, right to life, right to freedom of movement, right to belief, right to how we choose to dress ourselves. So one of the questions that has come that actually relates to this very point that, you know, we wanted to discuss is, do you feel that, or the feedback that you are receiving from the country, does it point to the need for a central figure, for a leading figure, to allow these voices to become coherent and to come together to further strengthen the changes that we see happening in this context at this point in time? Or are you seeing signs pointing to other processes that perhaps may be unprecedented in this and similar spaces? What are your thoughts on the issue of leadership of this particular movement?
That is a great question. And if you had asked that a while ago, I would have fallen into the typical, the perspective that there needs to be a central leadership, needs to be organized. This is how we mobilize change. And I do think that that's, of course, the case. But I think in terms of our thinking, we have to open ourselves and get out of that either or. Either it's leaderless or it's not. That there can be many different types of forms of leaders. Groups can be leaders, right? We have seen one of the, if we consider who's a leader of this movement, we would say women. That's a group. That's not a person. And so we might have to even, change what we consider to be leadership and be more flexible in our thought, because that also can be that can discourage protest movements. If we say you have to have a leader and perhaps not a clear one person or two people has emerged, that can really discourage people from going out to protest, because it's not saying we're on your side, it's saying you're not doing things right. So I believe that it's, this protests have moved in a way that's pretty leaderless as far as I can see. I think there are local leaders for sure. There are regional groups that have emerged, local groups that have emerged. And there are certain, of course, people who are, supporting the movement who are being more vocal, who have more social media following, for example. But it might be the idea, if we're living in a more multipolar world, perhaps our social movements might be more multipolar as well. There might be many different types of leaders emerging, many different concepts of leadership. Baraya is a song that is a leader itself, right? It leads people. So even reconsidering what we think leadership, I think is very important for us outside who are so desperate to help, so that we kind of maybe go back to one idea, but also the way to provide support for how things actually are in the country. And that might help, that kind of leading from behind, I guess, if you will, might help certain leaders perhaps coalesce or things sort of shake out. But I think also right now we're at a place where there's so much rage, a legitimate rage with young people, that it might not be the time for leadership. It's like, when something makes you very upset, you don't want to think rationally, right? You don't want to work through the issues. You just want to be so angry about it or so upset about it, right? And just be like, this hurts, or you just want to cry about it, that it's not the time for rational leadership yet. And it might not be the time for rational leadership. So that's why I believe we should trust the way that they are pursuing what they need to pursue, if that makes sense. So maybe it's maybe not such a clear answer, but I think it's not such a, I think we're at a unique moment, unique type of protest. And also one that is full of a lot of feeling. Yes. That is really being processed.
Absolutely. One of the young people who wanted to actually join this, but for fears of security couldn't, contacted me through a safe mechanism and said, listen, for the first time in our history, we're experiencing how, carbon turns into diamonds, because we are surrounded with pressure from all sides, including you out there wanting to tell us what to do. but all we want of you is to allow us to transform and transform with us. It's not either or, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
You've pointed this out too now. It's not that we have one form of leadership. It's, let's see what emerges from this process. One of the other young people who was on the same call sort of conveyed to me that this, you know, if there is a point about education, it's important to share with our countrymen that we're all learning for the first time. It's not that we're doing what our parents did. We are all learning for the first time how to stand up for our rights in a way that will get somewhere. So this assuming this almost posture of being open to education, to learning in a new way for all of us, shoulder to shoulder, is perhaps in itself a point of education and learning, because we've always looked to a single figure to lead us. But of course, in our past struggles, we've you know, during the constitutional revolution, we've looked at bodies of leadership at local, regional, national level. You know, the sort of also documents that may lead our struggle for change. So it seems from what is coming out from young people in Iran is that we need to stand together. The demonstrations that happened a few weeks ago in 160, I think was the last count, spots around the planet, was unprecedented. So we're seeing a lot of things we haven't seen before, and that begets an approach that is experimental, inquisitive, curiosity, and these are perhaps new characteristics for education that maybe as a society we haven't together explored before. So what do you then suggest, again, because you're involved with technology, with human rights, with education, you know, and have been for the past few years in a very intense way and at a very high level, and keeping your focus on grassroots, what do you suggest educational outlets, be they institutions, formal institutions, be they foundations like Persia, be they media outlets that are informing and shaping our perspective, how do you suggest we would be able to perhaps assist Generation Z Iranians in Iran and around the world?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point earlier, you know, about that, thinking about this in a bit of a different way. You imagine if you're a young person and you've heard nothing but supreme leader, you might say, we don't want leaders. That's been the problem. So, you know, it's important, like, you know, you said, that to keep that open. It's a very understandable, and there's nothing wrong with it. You know, from the land that gave us human rights might come a new way of doing protests too. That was a very new idea when Cyrus came up with it. And so who knows what now is coming from that same land, you know, that same spirit, which I think is very beautiful to imagine that creativity hasn't gone anywhere. That humanity hasn't gone anywhere, although it's been suppressed, I believe, for some time now, but it's emerging in a very passionate way. So for support, you know, me personally, I think the role of education is changing. I think it has to change. Perhaps before the internet, and I've, you know, because we still remember life before the internet, but before the internet, you know, a professor or educational institution, they played a very important role because they were, you know, sort of the access to the knowledge that the students couldn't get, the young people couldn't get. You can Google or Google Scholar everything out. The same things the professors are reading. There's no, you know, secret anymore. You know, there's no gatekeeping of the academic journals like there used to be. The research is all out there. You can all find it. So I think that educational institutions and professors and foundations who work in education have to be more than being a human, as I say, a human conduit to Google, right? But our model of education really hasn't changed. What does it mean to be an educator if my students are already educated, right? If they can already find everything. And so I believe that the education has to, especially with you know, talking about Iranians, in my experience, you know, is less of this sort of I know everything and more of a side of, you know, what you do know is that you have been able to, you've read a lot, you've been focused on something a lot, you know, educational institutions, and focusing more on the curatorial side of things, about bringing the relevant sides of the conversation to the students. And also, really importantly, is letting the students find their own way and being the support for that path, rather than saying this is incorrect, this is wrong. Of course, sometimes sometimes it clearly is wrong. Just want to be clear. Not everything goes, but but also in a way that supports the sort of track they're going with a lighter touch. Education is a very old, one of the oldest sort of professions that we have out there. So it has that sort of very heavy cultural baggage to it, a lot of, that sort of cultural karma, if you will. Similar to Iranian culture, right? It's very old. There's a lot of things are very set in stone in a way, which is lovely, but also sometimes we see the young people, they want to try mix it up a little bit. So I think we have to transform education to, work in a more curatorial way, and also in a way that is more deeply supportive of each individual Iranian student that comes forward. Like, what is it that they pursue? I have heard from Iranian students, like, my parents say I should be involved in politics, but I want to do pottery. And there's so much pressure, or their professors will, even, try to do this sort of stuff. So can we ensure that education is a bit of a lighter touch now? I mean, if we think more broadly, the goals of educating collectively, we've really reached them. We really have reached a lot of them. Access to information is unprecedented. People are far more aware of, of global issues, of, critical theoretical things than they've ever been aware of. Right? So it's been an enormous success. So that means our model has to change. We got there. There's a lot to do. I'm not saying we've achieved everything, but we've gotten to an enormous place. And so now maybe we take a step back a bit and we help, guide and support and encourage rather than dictate. So that's how I think that educational institutions need to take a step back and listen rather than tell. And that's very hard from an educational standpoint to do, because the whole thing is about, this is what's right, or this is how it goes, or let me, explain it to you.
Yes, let me tell you what is going to go there.
Yeah, but the young people, some of them, they want some of that, but they also really do want the space to say, hey, I can Google the same things professor. Like, there's no secrets here. So it's a bit more of a balancing act than it was in the past. And that's I think very important to make education remain relevant too.
Absolutely. One of the questions that has come in actually applies to one of our final points, and that is the young people that we now see on the streets everywhere seem to possess a sort of a selfless sense of courage, a fearlessness that is not only to be admired and emulated, but to be perhaps reflected on, to see, where does this come from? How did we get here? Again, really approaching it with a posture of inquiry. So how do you think this sense of selflessness, this sense of fearlessness, is it going to lead to substantial change in terms of life, in terms of access to rights? And if so, again, how do we position ourselves as individuals in Iran, as individuals around the world, particularly led by Generation Z? How do 15, 14, 18-year-olds position themselves to work with this change that is coming?
Yeah, that's it's a really good question. And one of the overwhelming senses that I have gotten from speaking with people is that
we seem to have some technical difficulty. Okay, if you want to repeat, because we lost you for a few seconds.
Sure. I think one of the things that I've really seen a lot and have heard a lot is that young people are done. They're just tired of the way they've been living. They're exhausted. It's finished, and it's and you see it. In social media, you'll see incredible pictures of just women without hijab sitting just next to clerics, and or just out. And of course, there's a crackdown. But there's something more fundamental that I think has shifted, is that inside, a lot of young people are just done with this whole thing. And we all know that in our lives. Like, there's a moment sometimes when you're just finished with something, you're like, I'm done with this. And it might take time for it to work out, but we all know that moment where something's been crossed and that it's heading towards an end or change, you know. And I feel that is very much how a lot of the young people feel. Like it will take time, but I feel like a big bridge has been crossed, a big river has been crossed, and they're just done with losing their youth, losing the gift that they have to serve, very old people. And I think that it will take time, but there will be a big transformation. Now, what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
The second part was just, how do they deal with the coming change? What is it?
Yeah. So that I think is what I think is potentially quite touchy and quite risky, what might come next, because that's the part I do worry about is, we've seen, some separate activities in Balochistan, Kurdistan, all that points to some sort of a bit of a perhaps regional fragmenting, which of course, is quite concerning in a country that's so multi-ethnic as Iran really is, which most people don't realize outside of Iran. So I think that there's going to be a couple of challenges. First, I think there's that political level challenge. Like as things change, as people lose their fear in one area, we tend to lose some fear in other areas, right? So things tend to open up. So boiled resentments, resentments that have been sort of simmering now start to boil. Other regional issues, separatist issues, religious issues, gender issues, and so on, economic, social class. People are talking about things in a very different way. They're emerging in a very different way. So I think one of the challenges would be, this is an open spirit around these protests, an open and inclusive nature to these protests, is can they ensure that the inclusivity will remain when things come up that might be a little bit more challenging than Zan, Zindagi, Azadi, that which is of course enormously challenging, but other things might come up outside of that frame. And but I really, perhaps I'm naive. I think if you work in human rights, you have to be naive. Yeah, I think it's an important part of the work, or education, right? Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work unless you're very naive. And so I do think it's a gift, but I think that we might be looking at things from a bit of a different lens in the way they see it. There's a level of confidence in how they're looking toward the future that the point isn't to get ahead of what's now. The point is to deal with now, and that they're very young Iranians are really quite focused on the now. So many of the older generations are looking, well, what will come next? What will the government be, or what has come in the past? But I don't have the sense that the young people are even thinking about that, not because it's not important, but because after so much pressure and fear for so many years, this is the moment that they have. This is what they have is right now. And the future in Iran, however things go, is so economically and socially uncertain, and so difficult with everything, with the challenges they face. Why not grab the now and not think about the future? And I don't think we should deny them that. They have been through enough. You do not come out and risk your life if you have not already been pushed to the limit. And so I think we in the diaspora can also, I think it's helpful for us to not try to foreclose on the future by projecting our own wishes on what the youth of Iran are asking for, which seems to me to be, let us have this moment, let us support us right now, and then we'll see what comes. They've had perhaps too much certainty in their lives, and it's a joy to sometimes in life to have a bit of uncertainty, right? And we all know that. Sometimes it's really nice to wake up and be like, I have no idea what I'm going to do today, and that feels great. So perhaps it is that kind of a dawn, maybe.
It's interesting that you use the word dawn, because it really is what we're experiencing with Generation Z in Iran and among Iranians everywhere, is that we're seeing an entirely different nation.
Yes.
We've turned a corner as a nation. There are so many things about what we've been through over the past 5 years that are just things that perhaps our parents used to dream of. and we're seeing it as reality. We're living through it. Of course, there's enormous sacrifice. Of course, as one of the questions that came earlier points to it, there's an unbelievable sense of fearlessness that we're witnessing among young Iranians everywhere. So maybe, as you say, we should invite ourselves and everyone else to entertain the notion of giving them this moment in time, and to wait to see how they want us to be of service to them rather than how we want to lead them, which is a very different approach to perhaps movements. And again, this is maybe the dawn of servant leadership in Iran and
Great point.
Iranian context. And so with that, perhaps comes the role of educators, because educators have always been at the forefront of servant leadership movements around the world, and hopefully spaces such as Persia, spaces as the universities around the world, educators around the world, individuals who are interested in welfare of Iranians will be able to make contributions that maybe we cannot conceive of right now. When in fact at Persia we were setting the schedule for our webinars this year, we had planned something very different for this session, and we had to quickly pivot because conditions changed so fast that we felt no, we can't go on to that. We have to address what's going on. And in that same sense, who knows, next month when we're doing our next webinar, who knows where we will be, whether we need to again pivot quickly and say no, this is what we see come out of Iran now, and this is what we need to do now. So maybe between now and 3 or 4 weeks from now when we're together again, would you like to maybe give us one thing that we could do as an Iranian to optimize the sacrifices that we are seeing by our fellow Iranians on Iranian streets? How is it that we could get the highest return on investment on what we are witnessing today?
That's a great question, very thoughtful question. And I think one thing that we cannot lose sight of is this is like, it is the first that we've seen, feminist, counter movement, women inspired, women led that we've ever seen. Why this is not blowing up mainstream media or everywhere is beyond me. It is an important moment in the history of, of gender around the world, not just in Iran, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. It's an enormously important. So I think 100% from all the young people I've talked with, 100% is keeping this up, keeping this out there. Don't let it be forgotten. And we have seen, on social media, an incredible level of awareness building that's being done by people outside the country, ensuring that this does not disappear from people's Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever people use, Twitter. It's not disappearing from people's feeds. It's staying there. I think that is one of the easiest and most important things that we can do right now, is ensure, because it really matters to young people that this is being talked about outside. They feel very much part of a global movement, acknowledging this is enormously historic, right? It was historic, a couple thousand years ago when we have the Cyrus cylinder. We have these, important. This is a land of creating history, not just suffering from history. And this is creating history and powerful. So ensuring that is happening, I think, is one of the absolute easiest, highest return on investment things that are out there. And ensuring that this is, central to the conversations on that's going on globally on gender and education. Absolutely, this should be highlighted. I encourage all educators, to devote some time to talking about this. I was just at a talk about the protests in Iran recently at the university out here, UCLA, and usually I've gone to many of these talks in the past, there's 10 people, something like that. It was packed, standing room only, young people, and minority were Iranian, right? Most of them were not, that were sitting there passionate to hear about this. And like, this is exactly shows that there's a hunger for it, and we cannot let that fire down. We at least have to do our part on the awareness side. And that's the easiest return on investment. Secondly, is doing like what the Persia Education Fund is doing, scholarship for young Iranians to study a lot of the topics that they're passionate about, like human rights. So I have never met an Iranian student who did not have some passion about human rights or positive social change. I've never. Didn't matter if they're studying, electrical engineering, molecular biology, or human rights studies, and encouraging that and thinking creatively about also, so perhaps a student in electrical engineering might want to do a small certificate course on human rights because they still care about the country. So even thinking creatively, not so in sort of disciplinary silos. So anyway, that's what I think to be the two easiest approaches that can be done on the outside right now.
That's wonderful. I think you're giving us a lot of food for thought. You're absolutely correct. As one of our participants also has noted just now in chat that, it is not, this is a land where we're making history. And that's something that perhaps many individuals in the past have pointed to from a sort of an academic, conjecture point of view, but we're living through these moments when we see a new version of Cyrus's cylinder being written. We're going through those very moments together. And you've touched a lot on what we could do with social media. And that was our last question, but I think you've already answered that. What is it that we could do to again optimize the use of our social media in support of this incredibly historic cause? Before I turn to you for that, because you've already told us a lot, but there may be other gems that you could share with us. One of the young people that contacted me saying, we don't think it's wise for us to be part of this webinar, but we just want you to know, by the way, said that, we are, and these were the words, he said, we are living our death sentence.
Wow.
So, take our life and make something with it, which was incredibly powerful and moving. I thought, for someone so young, 21 years old, to say we are living through our death sentence, this sense of, again, like the other youth shared with me that, we're like carbon that is being pressured from all sides to turn into diamonds. This sense of being real about what they're experiencing in Iran, but going beyond it and saying, but there's got to be something beyond this, is in itself just historic. So how do we encapsulate that? How do we use our social media to advance this incredibly important cause, perhaps beyond the boundaries of this generation and this particular land? What do we do to globalize the message of young Iranians today?
Yeah, that's first of all, it's extremely touching what that person said, and it's really heartbreaking, and it's also, it strikes me also very much as very wise. If having worked with a lot of protesters in the past, there's a sense in a way that they're living more life in these days than they have lived in decades in the past, and there's a real wisdom in that. One thing to honor what this person has said that has struck me is, in the past cycles of Iranian protests, I've seen the diaspora, I've seen, they share on social media for a couple of days and then they go back on to something else. It's not slowing down. Every time you go on to social media, they're sharing, non-Iranians, keeping it up. And I think, it's understanding perhaps a bit of a nuanced thing with social media is a lot of algorithms, they learn from content you engage with, and also content you share, and it impacts also the content that your friends see. So understanding that this is how the algorithms work, so engaging with content that raises awareness is also a way to game the system a little bit, is to ensure that Iranian issues are popping up on your friends' feeds, not only sharing it yourself, but engaging with the content and making a conscious choice to share this and to have, and to get it out there so that we can also change the algorithms' results in a way that this issue also doesn't fade away from algorithmic disinterest, right? Which is a great, people might be disinterested, but now it's even greater tragedy if the algorithm's disinterested. So I think working on that and just continuing to build awareness. And what I have seen to be most powerful, are voices of support, not criticism, and not even voices that are really angry, hostile toward the regime. I don't think that negativity is particularly resonant on social media right now. People want to see what are people inside of the country doing, sharing their videos, sharing the art that they're making. it's incredibly powerful. So again, like I said earlier, I just think the fact of continuing to raise awareness, continuing to try to game the algorithms, bringing this up in classrooms as educators, ensuring that this issue doesn't, die like that, which I don't think it will. It's incredible. And also, I think talking quite frankly about our experience as people in the diaspora and what does this mean? It's been hard for me to focus on anything else but these protests for weeks. And talking with people, hey, I'm sorry, I'm a little out of it today. Someone posted on Instagram, sorry, I haven't responded to your text message. My country is burning. And so I thought that these sorts of things, like normalizing that it's not all, like people come from different places, that people come from Iran. This is what's happening in Iran. This impacts me. I'm not going to pretend it's okay. I'm not going to pretend it's not on my mind. And normalizing it in conversations, just everyday stuff. It's these, like Eleanor Roosevelt talked about, it's these little acts of resistance that build up human rights around the world. It's the casualness of it too. So that's what I would say. It's the everyday it's the everyday that is so powerful.
Well, you've given us a lot of food for thought and a lot of interesting info bites to ponder on, to reflect on, and to implement in our as we've been used to for thousands of years, in our words, thoughts, and actions.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for carrying this webinar on your own. Apologies that our other panelists last minute was unable to join, but it certainly has been a pleasure to dedicate all that time to you and to hear so much about what you not only what you've done in the past, particularly with the green movement and the innovative manner in which you've begun an educational journey out of what we went through as a nation, and to serve the community the way you have sort of assessed the natural stirrings at the grassroots level to be, but to continue to inspire us to hopefully perhaps join you and accompany you and the likes of you in ensuring that generations that Iranians are able to access more. And thank you for highlighting Persia's scholarship. The Ansari Scholarship for Human Rights is available for anyone who wants to apply as soon as possible. And yes, we are very eager to work with individuals and organizations to come up with innovative ways of supporting anyone in any field wanting to study the role of human rights and the contributions of Iran in this particular field, perhaps not just in the past, but certainly in the future. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please stay tuned with our site and social media for information coming on our next webinar in November. Thank you for supporting Persia. Thank you for supporting Iranians everywhere, and see you again soon.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real privilege to speak about this, and I hope you're not too tired of hearing me speak, but it was an honor, and I hope this has been helpful for everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.